Guatemala is a multi-party constitutional republic. The country last held national and local elections in 2019. Voters elected Alejandro Eduardo Giammattei Ifala as president for a 4-year term beginning January 2020. International observers consider the presidential election as generally free and fair. The National Civil Police, which is overseen by the Ministry of Government and headed by a Director General appointed by the Minister, is responsible for law enforcement. The Ministry of National Defense oversees the military, which focuses primarily on operations in defense of the country, but the government also used the army to support the National Civil Police in internal security operations, as permitted by the Constitution. Civilian authorities maintained effective control over the security forces. There were reports that members of security forces committed some abuses. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest and detention, transnational repression against individuals in another country, including threats, harassment, surveillance, coercion, and misuse of international law enforcement tools, serious problems with the independence of the judiciary, serious restrictions on free expression and media, including threats of violence against journalists and unjustified arrests or prosecutions against journalists, serious government corruption, lack of investigation of and accountability for gender-based violence, crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting members of indigenous groups, crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or intersex persons, crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting persons with disabilities, and significant restrictions on workers' freedom of association, including violence and threats against union leaders. Impunity, including by high-level officials, continued to be widespread. Corruption, efforts by organized criminal actors to secure impunity, and undermining of anti-corruption institutions and the judiciary by corrupt political actors made it difficult for meaningful investigation and prosecution of crimes, including corruption and human rights abuses, involving public officials.